land you're looking at was home to the very first people in the entire Americas. In fact, the oldest civilizations in the New World flourished right here, only to have their destiny completely rewritten by an empire that arrived late. But that's just the beginning. So if you want to dig deeper, let's rewind the clock over 14,000 years. Ecuador became home to some of the oldest civilizations in the entire continent, like the Valdivia, the Correra, and the Bahia, which were building vibrant societies and flourishing for thousands of years. They had secured their rule, and life was rolling along. Until about 1500 CE, when a new powerful force marched in from the south, the Incas. Compared to their stronghold in Peru, the Incas actually arrived quite late to this northern territory, and their rule in Ecuador was relatively short-lived. But don't let that fool you. The local people, particularly the Duchichelas, fought back with everything they had. They put up an admirable resistance, but the might and powerful organisation of the Inca Empire eventually proved too much. But even with that brief rule, the Inca legacy is still woven into the fabric of the country. Take Ingapirca, for example. It's the only intact major Inca ruin in Ecuador. And it is astonishing. Here you'll find remnants of their traditions everywhere, sitting right alongside the legacies of those older, more eclectic cultures. But as is the case with so much of Latin America, everything changed in the early 16th century. In 1531, the Spanish forces, led by General Pizarro, reached the coast. And by this point, the powerful Inca Empire was already dealing with years of internal conflict and regional divisions. So when the Spanish arrived with their terrifying weapons, horses and armour, it became relatively easy to suppress the remaining Inca power. The end of the Inca era here is a dramatic, tragic story. Atahualpa, the Inca leader, was captured, tried and executed. But rather than let the Spanish conquerors get their hands on the capital's riches, Atahualpa's general, Ruminahui, completely destroyed the capital. Talk about a final stand. The Spanish weren't deterred, though. They rebuilt the city, and in 1534, Quito was set up as a major hub for the colonial elite. So if you wander through Quito's Old Town today, the stunning Spanish-era architecture is an undeniable testament to the wealth and prominence. They brought the arts and sciences, attracting the best minds from all over Europe. But let's be real. This affluence came at a terrible cost. Life under colonial rule was brutal for indigenous Ecuadorians. They were forced into hard labour on plantations and farms, growing an economy that was heavily based on agriculture. And this legacy, for better or worse, continues to this day. Before that, though, let's talk a little bit more about 19th century Ecuador. By 1809, Quito had successfully secured a self-governing junta, with Guayaquil following suit in 1820. Then on May 24, 1822, full independence was finally declared. And you know who was leading the charge? The legendary Simón Bolívar, with his forces led by Antonio José de Sucre. But even though independence was declared, Ecuador wasn't an independent republic yet. It was initially joined with Colombia, Panama, and Venezuela to form a megastate called Gran Colombia. And it wasn't until 1830 that Ecuador finally proclaimed itself the independent republic we know today. So, who was the first president? A Venezuelan-born army general who wrote the country's constitution, declared Quito the capital, and made Roman Catholicism the official religion. It's Juan José Flores. Unfortunately, the first 50 years of this brand new republic were full of instability, political chaos, and presidential assassinations. Poverty was a constant issue, and then came a massive headache that would haunt them for decades, a devastating land dispute with their neighbour, Peru, over the upper Amazon region. Despite the political turmoil, agriculture kept the country going. After World War II, there was a much-needed boom thanks to skyrocketing banana exports. Ecuador was starting to earn the title of a banana republic. But seriously, the instability continued. Military coups, rampant corruption, and even a stint of dictatorship stunted the country's growth. The biggest game changer? Oil. In 1967, oil was discovered, and it quickly became the country's main export. Ecuador briefly prospered on the back of this black gold. That is until the 1980s, when a severe drop in oil prices, combined with disastrous agricultural years brought by droughts, floods, and a catastrophic earthquake plunged the country into a severe economic depression. On top of billions in foreign debt, the rebuilding costs alone were over $600 million. The inflation got so out of control that by the end of the 1990s, citizens started trading in US dollars unofficially. Despite that turbulent ride, where does Ecuador stand today? It's a country finding its footing. The last 2 decades have seen progress. They're world leaders in banana and cocoa exports, and they are actively and smartly marketing themselves as an exceptional tourist destination. And honestly, they are. They're the famous maker of the Panama hat. Oh, and they pack an unbelievable amount of incredible landscapes into a relatively small area. Which brings us to the next section. So here's a mind-blowing fact you probably didn't know before. Ecuador is the only country in the world actually named after a geographical feature, the equator. That's commitment. And within its relatively compact area of around 256,000 to 277,000 square kilometers, which is more or less 100,000 square miles, it contains 4 entirely different worlds. First up, imagine a colossal, rugged backbone running right down the center of the country from north to south. That's La Sierra, the Andean highlands. This is the land of high-altitude cities and magnificent extremes. You've got Quito, which is one of the world's highest capital cities, and Cuenca. But the mountains themselves are the real stars. Ecuador has over 40 volcanoes, and most of them are right here. The chart topper is the epic Chimborazo, which is about 6,310 meters, or almost 21,000 feet. And here's a fun fact for you. Because the Earth bulges at the equator, Chimborazo's summit is actually the farthest point on Earth from its center. Then, west of the Andes, everything drops dramatically into the coastal lowlands, known as La Costa. This region is a gorgeous mix of dense mangrove forests, rapid rivers, and of course, miles and miles of beautiful beaches. This is where you find Guayaquil, Ecuador's largest and most populous city, nicknamed the Pearl of the Pacific for its beauty and culture. And if you're into activities, La Costa is your playground. Think whale watching, surfing, diving, and paragliding. Plus, the coastal cuisine is famously fresh and flavorful. Now, cross back over the Andes and head east, and you enter a different universe. El Oriente, which is the Ecuadorian Amazon rainforest. This is the country's largest region, and it's home to one of the world's most biologically diverse natural habitats. We're talking millions of species of plants, insects, mammals, and birds. About 42% of the country's total surface area is covered by natural forest, and the Amazon is a huge part of that. It's a place of incredible lushness and ancient life, home to communities like the Huaorani and Shuar, who still practice ancestral traditions and utilize incredible medicinal plants. And finally, a short flight or a long sail from the coast takes you to one of the world's true natural wonders, the Galapagos Islands. This archipelago is made up of 13 main islands and over 100 islets and rock formations. Now, despite being right on the equator, the islands get cool ocean currents, creating a unique mix of tropical and temperate climates. But the real magic comes from their extreme isolation. This created a living laboratory for evolution, giving rise to species found nowhere else on the planet. Giant tortoises, marine iguanas, blue-footed boobies, and playful sea lions. Trust me, it's every bit as miraculous as it was when Darwin first visited. So which of these 4 incredible worlds would you want to explore first? The towering heights of the Andes, the beautiful coasts, or the evolutionary marvels of the Galapagos? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're thinking about that, let me introduce you to another aspect of Ecuador worth learning: politics and economy. Because right now, Ecuador is standing at a huge crossroads. Since taking office in 2023, President Daniel Noboa has been pushing a bold agenda: security and economic reform. His big move was declaring an internal armed conflict and deploying the military to fight the powerful drug cartels. This was necessary because, in less than a decade, Ecuador's national homicide rate has skyrocketed from about 6 per 100,000 in 2018 to a staggering 47 per 100,000 people in 2023. This country went from being an island of peace to a key transit hub for drugs heading to the US and Europe. So to finance this war on crime, Noboa raised the value-added tax, or VAT from 12% to 15%. And speaking of money, the economy is heavily reliant on oil exports and, crucially, is dollarized, meaning the US dollar has been the official currency since 2000, which keeps inflation low to around 1.3% as of 2025, but completely removes the central bank's ability to use monetary policy. So, with an estimated GDP of about $125 billion, according to the World Bank's 2025 estimate, the economy remains fragile, especially as the security crisis crushes investor confidence. All in all, Ecuador is fighting a war on the streets, in the prisons, and in its balance sheets. It's a huge challenge, and the world is definitely watching to see which path this incredible nation chooses to stabilize its future. But for now, let's focus on the present, specifically the country's people and culture. Ecuador is officially a multi-ethnic and multicultural nation, and when you travel here, you don't just see one culture. You see a stunning mosaic that's been built over thousands of years. Think about how the population is spread out. The bustling Pacific coast has about 6.3 million people. The towering Andes right behind it holds over 5.5 million people. And then you have the quieter, more remote regions, the vast Amazon with its 600,000 inhabitants, and the unique world of the Galapagos Islands, home to about 17,000 residents. So, as you can imagine, the fabric of Ecuador is woven from many threads, but three are dominant. First, there's the indigenous peoples. There are an incredible 14 distinct nationalities here, each with its own language and worldview. When you drive through the highlands, you're in the traditional territory of the Quechua speaking groups, folks like the globally recognised Otavalos, whose textile market traditions go back centuries, and the proud Saraguros. Then you head into the Amazon, and you've got the Shuar, the Waorani, and the Achua. Oh, and did you know there are groups like the Tagaeri who have been left completely isolated, living in an intangible zone by state decree, respecting their wish to remain untouched by the outside world. How incredible is that commitment to cultural preservation? But wait, the story isn't just Native American and European, because we absolutely cannot forget the Afro-Ecuadorian community. They have forged a deep and vibrant culture, primarily concentrated in the northern coast around Esmeraldas and in the highlands of the Chota Valley. Their rhythms, their resilience, it's a massive, necessary pillar of the Ecuadorian identity. And these threads, Indigenous, African, and European, all weave together to form the majority of the population. That's right, the overwhelming majority of Ecuadorians identify as Mestizo, which encapsulates the beautiful blend of Indigenous and European heritage. This is the true melting pot where the colonial past and the ancestral roots meet, shaping everything that follows, from the music to the food. So what does this blend sound like? The music here is a living history lesson. It's a fusion that birthed some truly unique genres. For instance, when you hear the soft, melodic tune of El Pasillo, which is basically the country's national music, you are listening to the sound of those European and indigenous forms blending together. Or when you listen to the lively, celebratory music of the Afro-Ecuadorian community, like the marimba or the bomba, it's impossible not to move. And what about the books? Ecuadorian literature has always had a fierce voice. In the early days, writers like Eugenio Espejo were influenced by European ideas, but it wasn't long before they started telling their own stories. The shift came with the social realism movement in the 20th century. Writers felt a powerful need to call out injustice. And here is where you find the country's most famous novel, Jorge Icaza's Huasipungo, which was published in 1934. This book was groundbreaking because it unflinchingly exposed the brutal exploitation faced by the indigenous peoples. That's why when you read Ecuadorian literature, you're not just reading fiction, you're reading the conscience of a country. And of course, we can't talk about culture without talking about food. So if you want to understand the 4 geographical regions, all you have to do is sit down and eat. The national cuisine, known as comida criolla, is the most delicious result of that massive cultural exchange. It's where native ingredients like corn, potatoes, and yucca meet the livestock and Mediterranean flavours brought by the Spanish. It's a culinary masterpiece. Then, when you're on the coast, you're tasting the bounty of the sea, like fresh, tangy ceviche, crispy patacones, which are smashed and fried plantains, and plenty of rice. It's light, tropical, and perfectly suited for the humid weather. But when you head up to the Andes, everything changes. The air is colder, and the food gets heartier. Here you'll find thick, warming soups, dozens of varieties of potatoes and corn, and the famous slow-roasted hornado. So, as you can see, Ecuador's identity isn't singular. It's a magnificent spectrum, and it's a culture that is absolutely essential to the Latin American story. That's why if you enjoyed this video, you're surely going to love this next one.